Vaping. It seems like it's absolutely everywhere, right? It's always being pushed as this high-tech, much less harmful way to smoke. But what does the science actually have to say about that? Today, we're going to cut through all that marketing smoke and mirrors and get to the reality of it. Look, for decades, we all knew the deal. Smoking is a killer. The message was simple and clear. And then, boom, vaping shows up on the scene, positioned as the modern, smarter choice. You know, a way to get your nicotine fix without all the deadly smoke. This whole comparison, it's really at the heart of the entire debate. But is that really the right way to be looking at this? You have to hand it to them, the initial pitch was pretty brilliant. E-cigarettes were sold not just as another product, but as this amazing technological solution. The big idea was to help heavy smokers finally quit by giving them a cleaner way to get the nicotine their bodies were craving.
And here was the key selling point, the thing that made it sound so legit. See, regular cigarettes work by burning tobacco, and that combustion process creates this horrible cocktail of cancer-causing stuff. Vaping devices, though, they just heat a liquid. So the thinking was, hey, no fire, no smoke, no problem. At least, that was the theory. Okay, so if it's not smoke, what on earth are people actually breathing in? Let's really get into it and break down what's going on when that little pot of e-liquid gets heated up and turns into that big cloud you see everywhere. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? We see these huge, often sweet-smelling clouds. But what are they made of? Is it just harmless water vapor like steam from a kettle? Well, the science is screaming, not even close.
And here is the most crucial thing to understand. That cloud isn't vapor, it's an aerosol. Now, what does that mean? It means it's this complex mixture of tiny, tiny liquid and solid particles all suspended in a gas. And we're not talking about water here. We're talking about a mix of nicotine, flavoring chemicals, and a bunch of other compounds, all designed to be carried deep, deep down into your lungs. So if you look at the e-liquid before it gets heated up, it seems pretty simple. You've got propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. They're basically the carriers for everything else. Then, of course, you have nicotine, and then a whole bunch of different flavoring agents, things like vanillin and menthol, to make it taste good. That's what's on the label. But here's the kicker. Everything changes the second you hit that button. That intense heat completely transforms those simple ingredients. That propylene glycol, it can break down into formaldehyde, and yes, that's the same chemical used for embalming. You get volatile organic compounds like benzene, which is something you find in car exhaust. And the metal heating coil itself can actually leak heavy metals like nickel and lead straight into the aerosol that you're about to breathe in. All right, so now that we have a better idea of what's actually in that aerosol, let's follow its journey through the body. What really happens when all these chemicals and tiny particles get into your system? The first stop, and this is the big one, is the lungs. This is ground zero. They take the most direct hit from every single puff, and the damage that we're starting to see is way more than just a little irritation. You know, studies are now linking e-cigarette use to a higher risk for chronic lung diseases, like COPD, that's the one that makes it incredibly hard to breathe, and bronchitis. If you have asthma, vaping can make your symptoms so much worse. And then you have these new conditions that are pretty much unique to vaping, like EVALI, which is a really severe sudden lung injury. And even some bizarre stuff like lipoid pneumonia, which is caused by fatty bits from the aerosol literally building up inside the lungs. But believe me, the damage doesn't stop in the lungs. Remember those ultrafine particles we talked about? Well, they are so incredibly small that they can pass right from your lungs into your bloodstream. And from there, they can travel to every single organ in your body, starting with your heart and your circulatory system. And this is where the numbers get really scary. Research shows that the vape aerosol can cause something called oxidative stress. Think of it like your cells are literally rusting, and it can damage the delicate lining of your blood vessels. For people who do both, vape and smoke, a huge analysis found their odds of developing cardiovascular disease were more than 2.5 times higher than people who don't use either. Next, we absolutely have to talk about one of the most vulnerable groups out there, pregnant women and their developing babies. The idea that vaping is somehow a safe choice during pregnancy is a really, really dangerous myth. So get this, a major meta-analysis found that vaping while pregnant is linked to a 53% higher risk of bad outcomes, like low birth weight and babies being born too early. And we're not just talking about risk. Case studies have shown that harmful heavy metals, things like lead and nickel, can actually cross the placenta and have been found in the organs of the fetus. And animal studies are suggesting that this kind of exposure could mess with brain development, potentially leading to long-term problems like anxiety. The very fact that these chemicals can get across the placental barrier and affect a developing fetus, well, it shows you just how invasive this stuff is at a cellular level. And that leads us right to the big question everyone has about any new product you inhale: cancer. With smoking, the link is rock solid. But with vaping, the picture is still coming into focus, and honestly, it's complicated.
This is the question on everyone's mind, right? Does vaping cause cancer? Well, the short answer is we don't have the final proof in humans just yet, but all the warning signs are flashing bright red.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. On one hand, when scientists look at large groups of people who vape but have never smoked, they haven't found a major increase in cancer risk. Yet. And that yet is a really important word because these cancers can take decades to show up. But on the other hand, what we're seeing in the lab is incredibly worrying. Studies on cells in a dish and on animals show that vape aerosols can cause DNA damage, it can stress out our cells, and it can even make existing tumors grow faster. These are like the classic biological red flags for cancer.
And look, it's not just about the direct physical harm to the person vaping. There is a massive public health crisis going on right now. The explosion of vaping among teens and young adults. We're creating a whole new generation that's addicted to nicotine.
The 2024 National Youth Tobacco Survey found that almost 8% of high school students are currently using e-cigarettes. Now, thankfully, that number is down from its peak a few years ago, but it still means we're talking about millions of teenagers using a highly addictive product with a lot of known health risks. So why are so many kids doing it? Well, it's basically a perfect storm. You've got literally thousands of flavors that taste like candy and dessert, which is a huge draw. Then there's peer pressure and just wanting to fit in, which is huge in high school. And for a lot of them, it's become a way they try to cope with stress and anxiety, which just creates this really dangerous cycle of dependence.
So after looking at what's in the aerosol, what it does to the body, the potential cancer risk, and this youth epidemic, where does that leave us? I think it's time we move past that simple and, frankly, really misleading argument that it's just safer than smoking.
So let's just say it point blank. The final verdict from the scientific community is becoming crystal clear. Vaping is not safe. It isn't just some harmless alternative. It's a source of inhaled chemicals that can damage your lungs, your heart, and even your DNA. It has its own unique and very serious list of health risks. And all of this leaves us with one last, kind of chilling question. For most of the 20th century, the tobacco industry was able to hide and confuse the science on cigarettes, and millions of people died. Today, we have the early data on vaping, and it is pointing in a very dangerous direction. So the question we all have to ask is, are we going to act on what we're learning, or are we about to make the exact same mistake all over again?